You know, Dio's use of the stone mask had led to all of the events on Phantom Blood and then on to unfold, but he hadn't originally planned to use the stone mask on himself. The original plan was to kill Jonathan with the mask, but that was before he had knew what it could do. But what if Dio didn't reject his humanity? What if Dio had originally just went on with his original plan? I had came with this full scenario and everything, but I had actually remembered that there was this manga where this question had a full separate scenario. I really do agree with it too for the most part, and this was a really well made manga by Virginia Room. These are the same people who had made the parody version of JoJo, which was hilarious, but onto the manga. I'm going to be general with what's in the manga, so reading it will be more for the viewer if you guys do want to read it after. Now, in the beginning, Jonathan and Dio have some back and forth exposition discussing the mask and its research. Then Dio gets a hold of the mask and starts messing around with Jonathan. Then Dio, being the sneaky, evil, terrible person he is, attacks Jonathan with the stone mask and his blood. Now, after getting attacked by the stone mask, he realizes that the mask wasn't just an execution tool. Then it looks like he goes to attack Dio, but he actually just ends up fleeing. Time passes and Dio becomes the son of George and the one to take over the Joestar home. While trying to research the whereabouts of Jonathan due to wanting closure, he encounters Zeppeli, who had actually encountered Jonathan before and tried to kill him. Jonathan had actually encountered Speedwagon before due to Speedwagon trying to rob a dead person, then one of Speedwagon's goons stabbed Jonathan and Speedwagon took care of him because he didn't actually plan to hurt Jonathan. In this, Speedwagon is actually more lighthearted towards random people. Originally, he liked Jonathan because of his respect for him, but now he feels bad for him. And after hearing Jonathan explain how his life came to be, Speedwagon gave Jonathan his dedication and had said that he would be doing anything in his power to help Jonathan. Jonathan had left to calm his bloodlust and he actually fell asleep somewhere. Turns out he's been asleep for about 3 years, but his bloodlust was only weakened. Now, Jonathan encounters Zeppeli because he heard him talking about the stone mask. After that, Zeppeli tries to kill Jonathan, even though Jonathan is just trying to explain that he just wants to go back to his normal body. Now Jonathan flees and starts to question what he needs to do before he loses his humanity, since there's nothing he can do to go back to being a human. Now Jonathan comes back to the Joestar household because he knew that Dio had wanted to finish what he had started, which was killing Jonathan. And then Dio also thinks he's fully capable of doing so with a knife. So they fight where they had fought in the main timeline with the same setting also, their fate being bound together, which would end in that household once and for all. And then it ended with the statue piercing Dio, but then also Jonathan. Jonathan had offered Dio either eternal life or eternal rest, but Dio was unable to answer because he was dead. The fight ends with Jonathan holding Dio in his arms, and while the roles in the exposition was switched, it had ended the same. Because if you remember how Jonathan died in the anime, he died holding Dio. Now, Dio died, but Jonathan is still holding Dio in his arms. Also, it was originally Dio who had offered Jonathan eternal life, but Jonathan couldn't answer because he was dead. Now, for the most part, I could agree with this scenario and I give all praise towards the artist that had created this. I'm not sure on the case of Speedwagon and also the 3 years of time skip using sleep, but that's really about it. This manga really does go across the whole fate situation in JoJo, and I should actually explain the fate in JoJo in a video, but basically both Jonathan is fated to die and Dio is fated to lose and die. There's a case where this isn't the case temporarily, but it will always end that way due to fate. In this manga, I assume that Jonathan is dead. Dio is definitely dead and had lost when it came to what he had wanted to do. In this, you also have Dio feeling fear because of what Jonathan had became, and he wasn't able to explain or understand it. He knew that Jonathan could have came back at any given time, and he had no idea what he would be able to do if he was confronted by Jonathan again. He's feeling that if he gets rid of Jonathan, then that will get rid of his fear of Jonathan. The problem with that is that he didn't have a single thing to defeat Jonathan with. Also, when thinking about it, I was sure that Zeppelis are fated to help Joestars and not kill them, and then you have Zeppeli not teaching Dio Hamon because, well, of course not. Dio is still a bad guy, and his fate was sealed with what decisions he had made. Now, that's going to be that scenario, or well, the first scenario. Now, I had 2 scenarios for when thinking about how this could play out, the ones that I had made. The first one had basically been the same as the beginning as the manga, where it's just Jonathan and Dio in a room with the stone mask and Dio uses it on him. except it's after the time skip and not beforehand. But I had it to where Jonathan realizes that Dio had tried to kill him, and he accidentally uses his new vampire strength when pinning Dio by the neck, and he crushes his throat. Then he realizes how strong he is, but then also realizes that he just killed Dio. While being angry, he would have also been saddened because of the bond he believed to have with Dio and all of that. While holding the now dead Dio in his arms in the same way that he did on the boat, he cries, and George Joestar comes into the room to see what Jonathan had done. George becomes deeply saddened and starts to go off on Jonathan about killing his second son. Jonathan tries to explain what had happened, but he's getting overwhelmed by his father's yelling, and he has no idea what to do. Then, while trying to get his dad to calm down by grabbing him by the shoulders, he breaks his father's ribs from holding him too hard, and his ribs puncture some of his organs, and he begins to die. Then Jonathan, realizing what he had done twice, he begins to run. He's overwhelmed with feelings of guilt, sadness, anger, and all types of feelings, so he can't think at the moment. And all Jonathan knows is that he needs to get away from home because he had destroyed what it was, even though it was actually all Dio's fault. He finds an area where it's just nature, and he remains there for the rest of the night. Now, after a few days, Zeppeli comes into the picture at the same area. While Jonathan sits down holding the stone mask, Zeppeli sees him. Zeppeli asks Jonathan about the stone mask and what had happened. Now, after Jonathan explains, and he asks how does he get back to normal, Zeppeli tells him about the only way possible. And while Jonathan is sitting down holding the stone mask in his hands, Zeppeli charges at Jonathan and focuses Hamon at the tips of his fingers and then cuts through Jonathan. It all ends with the death of Jonathan and continues on as the story of William Zeppeli. Now, after that, the main question would be, well, what now? Well, with a story with no Jonathan or Dio, the next enemies are the Pillarmen, which I already had made a video for, so if you guys hadn't seen that, it's going to be in the card in the top right of this video or at the end with the end cards, along with all of the other what ifs I had done. Now, the final scenario is based on the stone mask being enough to take away Jonathan's humanity, that and a combination of betrayal and anger. Now, Jonathan isn't the one to seek revenge, but this is a take on if he was. He's really a noble character, and he really only stands for justice, but we're going to switch that up for a little bit. Going to use the same beginning as the last one, so we're going to set it right after that. This time, Jonathan does flee to figure out what had happened to him, but this is also post-time skip. Now, Jonathan finds out his strength, jumping ability, regeneration, and all vampiric enhancements that they get. He doesn't learn any of the abilities that Dio did though, because that was during the training time Jonathan and Dio had, so he only has the enhancements. Dio begins to research the stone mask and tries to figure out what had happened to Jonathan, and now after visiting Wang Chan, he uses the stone mask on a random person and it has the same outcome as the last time, minus a broken arm. This happens in the dead of night, and the newly made vampire almost kills Dio, but Zeppeli saves Dio before the vampire has the ability to do anything fatal. So Zeppeli asks Dio about his possession of the mask and what he had done with it. Now Dio explains what had happened to Jonathan, but in a way where it seems that it wasn't an attempt to kill him. So Dio and Zeppeli have this back and forth, and after that Zeppeli is telling him to keep in touch and all of that. So Dio returns home after a few days to find that no one is present at home. George has been taken out for medical care with the servants of the household, so it's an empty Joestar household with a very eerie and dark setting. And I'm just gonna put this in right here because I didn't actually write this down to give the information on it. So the reasoning why George and all the servants would be out is because Jonathan, when Dio was with Wang Chan and all, Jonathan had went to the household to go tell them everything that Dio had done and to leave, so they wouldn't get hurt and anything after that. And he actually basically explained the whole situation, what happened with Dio and all, and they found out, oh, Dio's a terrible person. So there's that. I forgot to include this, but now it's included, and now you get why this has happened. So then you have Jonathan, who had been standing on the ceiling this whole time, and then he drops down behind Dio. Now this moment is basically, omae wa shinderu, but he actually lets Dio explain himself for a bit. But while Dio tries to explain, he's trying to pull out a knife to stab Jonathan. Now, he tries to stab Jonathan, but then Jonathan does exactly what Dio had done and gets stabbed through the hand so he can get a hand on Dio. This happening is a reference to the first fight of Jonathan versus Vampire Dio and all, if you guys remember it, where Jonathan had stabbed Dio, and basically you get the gist of it. So Jonathan crushes Dio's right hand and makes it unusable. Now the home is slowly going up in flames because of plot, and Dio is running away for his life. Now Jonathan corners him and Dio starts spewing on him about his nonsense about how this wasn't supposed to happen, and Jonathan tries to go towards Dio, but Dio backs up a little too far and he falls. He falls directly onto the statue just like before, except he dies when this happens. Jonathan picks Dio up off of the statue and holds him the same way that he did on the ship and also like in the manga. Jonathan apologizes to Dio and tells him that he forgives him for what he had done. Now you have Zeppeli barges into the burning Joestar manor to see that Jonathan is holding a completely drained Dio. Jonathan didn't apologize to Dio for killing him. He apologized for disgracing his death by draining him. Zeppeli doesn't take any time and he charges immediately at Jonathan. Now I had originally wanted Zeppeli to kill Jonathan right there, but with what benefit you get by drinking the blood that was used for the stone mask had made me change the outcome. Dio had used this blood for the stone mask and Jonathan had drank all of Dio's blood right then and there, which had led to a huge vampire power boost for some reason. So with how fate goes, both Jonathan and Zeppeli would die right there in the household, which would actually just immediately end JoJo as a whole, except for, well, I guess 3 parts. I would say 5 parts, but I'm not really sure what's going on with 2 parts of JoJo really, but I won't spoil what that is since this is generally a Phantom Blood video. Now, what I had realized with all of these scenarios is that the outcomes would really be the same for the future. People really don't realize how huge of a part Phantom Blood was. Both the protagonist and antagonist, they connect all the way down through the history of the show, and when you think of JoJo really, it's an anime of one guy, but then it just furthers down with his lineage while progressing forward. So thank you guys so much for watching. I would actually like to know what you guys think about the explanations or speculations on things like Fate, the Stone Mask, or whatever you guys can think of. If enough people like a suggestion, I'll probably end up doing it for a video. If you guys liked the video, make sure to leave a like so I know that you guys enjoyed it. And watching the video is one thing, but knowing you guys liked it helps me sleep at night because it's kind of difficult when there's this guy outside. Every time I walk out there, he keeps on biting the dust. I had made an Instagram for the channel. Make sure that you follow it if you haven't. I also have a Twitter where I honestly just retweet art or stuff that's funny. Also, back onto the Instagram. Thank you guys for following before. I'd seen a lot of my fans' pages and I actually became speechless due to a lot of you guys being really talented. And then there's the guys who post memes, and the majority are actually pretty funny. So for the most part, all of you guys for working hard and everything on art, or really like as a whole, just all work together. Keep pushing forward. I believe in you guys 100%, and I hope you guys always strive and prosper. But until the next one, peace out and Godspeed.